including implementing a strengthened freshwater action plan, creating the Canada Water Agency, and advancing the review of the Canada Water Act. We engaged provinces and territories on the creation of the Canada Water Agency. Many provinces and territories support the creation of the agency to strengthen the whole of government coordination, as well as support science, data, and funding initiatives. The federal government has been clear that the agency's work will remain within federal authority, will respect provincial and territorial jurisdiction, and will be highly collaborative. En juin 2023,
in June 2023, the Canadian Water Agency was created as a branch of the Department of Environment and Climate Change. Last November, legislation was introduced as part of Bill C-59, the Fall 2023 Economic Statement Implementation Act, to fully establish the agency as an autonomous entity outside the department. The agency's mandate is to improve the management of freshwater across Canada by offering leadership, better collaboration federally, and improved collaboration with the territories, provinces, and Indigenous communities in order to be able to proactively take on the national, regional, and transboundary challenges.
Compete with existing legislative or regulatory frameworks for fresh water. The agency will focus on intergovernmental collaboration by leveraging existing FPT mechanisms, such as the Canadian Council for Ministers of the Environment. There are other excellent examples of effective FPT cooperation, including the National Hydrometric Program, which is led by the National Administrators Table, with representatives from each of the provinces and territories, and with National Hydrological Service providing federal leadership. The Canada Water Agency is delivering key elements of the Strengthened Freshwater Action Plan. This includes work in 8 federal water bodies of national significance. Many of these initiatives are already occurring in collaboration with provinces and territories, and there have been long-standing agreements in place with Ontario, Quebec, and Manitoba. Furthermore, ongoing work in interjurisdictional domestic water bodies has demonstrated in facilitating collaboration on transboundary freshwater management, such as the work of the Prairie Provinces Water Board and the Mackenzie River Basin Board. L'Agence canadienne de l'eau fait également progresser l'examen de la loi sur les ressources en eau du Canada.
The Canadian Water Agency is also advancing the review of the Canada Water Act. The pre-engagement phase has been launched, and we are currently meeting with all interested provinces and territories. The agency is also developing a national strategy on freshwater data. We will be holding a workshop in September in order to collaboratively develop approaches to freshwater data. And ECCC is also leading the development of a national scientific program on freshwater and is coordinating a roadmap that will identify the most pressing freshwater challenges in Canada.
The committee's work on freshwater. We welcome your findings, and we're excited to see the conclusions of your freshwater study. This will certainly inform our work going forward. Thank you.
Merci, Monsieur Wolfish.
Thank you, Mr. Wolfish. We will now move on to the questions. Mr. Leslie, you have 6 minutes.
Mr. Chair, before we start the clock, could I just ask a question of clarification?
Yeah.
I'm still relatively new, but in my experience and previous understanding, without unanimous consent, when the bells are ringing, you can't drop the gavel because you can't get UC to start the meeting. And I understand that we have witnesses here, so I don't want to actually prevent any of this from happening. But my concern is kind of that precedent of the chair just deciding to start a meeting while the bells are ringing. So maybe through you, Mr. Chair, to the clerk, is that an abnormality that we could get some clarification on in previous practice?
Is Mr. Leslie correct? Yeah. However, I did ask for UC to vote to carry on the meeting and to stop and vote 5 minutes before the vote starts. So basically,
in this meeting?
Yeah.
But how did it ever start?
The meeting? Well, I asked for UC to proceed in the following way, that we would basically start the meeting. I don't have verbatim what I said, but that we could start the meeting, and then when we're 5 minutes from the vote, that we stop and vote, and then resume. In other words, that we all stay here and vote, here in the room and vote, and so that we don't waste time. And there was no objection.
I'm entirely in agreement. I'm happy and willing to do that. I was not here because I was voting in the chamber for this, so I did not hear that, because my understanding with the 15-minute bells following question period that the meeting could not commence. It's kind of the same situation then as it was right after question period as it is now. My concern is, broadly speaking, we have the ability for the chair to drop the gavel without the full attendance. A couple of my colleagues across the way came in because they were in the exact same position. And I just worry where this may lead within this committee or other committees.
Were you? I don't recall if. I know we always give 10 minutes after a vote, so I thought I'd given 10 minutes, but maybe I stand corrected. Well, then I apologize profusely to the committee. I ask, for unanimous consent to carry on, and again, we had agreement that we'll stay in the room when the vote happens, and I'll break 5 minutes before the vote, so in about 11 minutes and 11 seconds, and we'll proceed that way. Is everyone good with that?
Can I offer my? Yes, I'm fine with that. I mean, I don't need to offer any reflections.
Yeah, so I apologize if that's what I did by error.
Consent from all parties was given, and that's generally the consensus rule, is that as long as we all agree that we're going to start, because there's only like 5 minutes between the last vote and these current bells. 14 minutes, 16 minutes ago.
Probably should have allowed a little bit more time for yourself and Madame Châtel and Madame Taylor-Roy to get here. So for that, I apologize.
Yeah, and Mr. I'm not trying to make I'm not trying to say anything negative towards the way you've done this.
You don't want to set a precedent.
Exactly.
Yeah,
and
I
so
agree.
perhaps if I could just offer my concern that this not be undertaken again at this committee or anywhere else.
Happen again, Mr. Leslie, I promise.
Okay, thank you. Well, I'll look to my colleagues to see if we're all happy to continue on. Okay. All right. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
So go ahead, you have 6 minutes.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. And to Mr. Wolfish, throughout the course of our study, multiple witnesses have appeared before the committee, and they've told us they really don't understand, based on the engagement with the Canada Water Agency, limited or at best kind of a handful of engagements, what the agency is actually going to do. They really don't understand what the purpose is or what specifically will be undertaken out of your office, which is deeply concerning, because I know the government has kind of tried to identify over the course of numerous years what the agency will do. And I'm sure you've seen the movie Office Space, so I'll put it in a very simplistic yet comedic manner. What would you say you do here?
Thank you for the question. So there are two key elements of our mandate that I would like to put forward. The first part is that we are to be implementing the Freshwater Action Plan that consists of 8 freshwater ecosystem initiatives across the country that will be continuing to work with provinces and territories and other partners for their implementation. The second element is the policy work that we do to coordinate the federal government, coordinate with provinces and territories, and coordinate with Métis, First Nations, and Inuit on issues around freshwater policy for the Government of Canada.
So, to me, there hasn't been a convincing argument that there is, beyond anecdotes of standardization of data. There's been some pieces that seem necessary. That said, it hasn't been convincing that there needs to be an entirely new agency. So, did anyone within ECCC, as far as you know, investigate whether or not the department could have done a similar task with existing resources?
So the department undertook consultations from 2020 to 2022. They spoke with thousands of Canadians. They had a number of bilateral and multilateral conversations with provinces and territories, and held a separate consultation with First Nation, Métis, and Inuit. In much of those interactions, it was recommended that an agency be created to be a focal point for coordination, for addressing issues around data and data accessibility and availability in Canada, and to continue the work to implement the Freshwater Action Plan, including being a place for the implementation of the agreements with Ontario, Manitoba, Quebec on the freshwater ecosystem.
So we've had a number of provinces testify that the range has been at anywhere from 0 to maybe 3 meetings, if I could summarize them collectively. So the engagement, in my view, has not exactly been robust. Would you be willing to table a summary of all of those engagements? I assume you've done a What We Heard report in the development of this, and I'm less concerned about online forums, particularly with provinces who have the regulatory jurisdiction over water. Could you table that with this committee?
We'd be able to provide you documentation on what we heard in our consultations with Canadians, with Indigenous representatives, and with the provinces and territories.
Thank you. How much money has been spent thus far standing up the Canada Water Agency?
I would have to get back to you on the numbers that we've spent in this past fiscal year, but it would be the equivalent of the salaries for the people who work in the program and the implementation of our freshwater programs. We can get back to you on how much was spent or is being spent in 24-25.
How many employees are there?
So the agency is composed of the employees who were working on water previously in the various disparate units across the department. That's in the range of around 120 employees that were working on various water programs that have now come into the agency. And then we've hired a few more to work on the policy and the coordination issues in the past year, and we're starting to build our corporate services.
How many of them are EX employees?
Our executive cadre, we have about 6. No, 2, 3, 6, 8, 9, including myself.
Have you allocated any dollars for any actual specific projects?
Indeed, we have a call out for programming for the Great Lakes. We've got a call out for Lake of the Woods, for Lake Simcoe. We have a call out for Plan Saint Laurent, and we have a call, and we are preparing calls out for the other remaining freshwater ecosystem initiatives.
Could you table a summary of the entirety of those projects with this committee?
We could table you those for which we have decisions, those that are, and we can table those for we have a call out, so we don't have the decisions yet on what those projects will be, but we can certainly table with you what the call has been, the purpose of the call. Will
the agency have any regulatory powers?
The agency will not have regulatory powers, no. The regulatory authorities from the minister that come from the Canadian Environmental Protection Act or the Fisheries Act or the Migratory Birds Act that deal with water will remain with the department.
Will you monitor water flows and or quantity, or just water quality?
Water flow will continue to be done by the Meteorological Service of Canada. Water quantity, the science work, will be continue to be done by Environment and Climate Change Canada and the Science and Technology branch.
Time's up. I'm just trying to get you to the microphones here. Is the microphone on now? Is my microphone on? Can you okay. On passe maintenant Monsieur Ali.
Now on to Mr. Ali, who is online.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the witnesses for being here today. My first question is about Canada Water Agency's relationship with the provinces.
Mr. Ali,
Chair, sorry, I'm getting a call from the House of Commons. Maybe a technical side. Just
you need to have your screen on in order to ask to participate.
I have my screen on.
Okay, there's a problem then. Okay, Okay,
Yeah.
we'll go to Mr. Van Couverden and then come back
yes.
to you in the second round.
Yes, please.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Van Couverden?
Thanks very much. I'm also, there we go. There isn't as bright a light as there usually is. Thank you again for attending once again this meeting. I think it's our last meeting. Is this our penultimate, our last meeting in this very important study? I'm very grateful for all of your work as somebody who's loved Canadian waterways for most of my life. This work is essential. When I say we, I mean people who use Canadian waterways for recreation, fishing, and otherwise are grateful for your work. Previously, I've spoken about the importance of conservation authorities and their water management programs, and I've kind of seen this a little bit as an extension of that work that we're able to do in Ontario because of the gift of forethought many years ago. Establishing the conservation authorities provided Ontario and Ontarians with a lot of reassurance, provided insurance companies with a lot of data, provided developers with do's and don'ts. There's sections of my riding of Milton, for example, which are floodplain, doesn't look like a floodplain, but when a 50 or 100-year storm comes through, there'd be damages. So we're really grateful for that work. And there's that old adage, if the best time to plant a tree was 50 years ago, then why not do it today? So I'm glad to see that from the perspective of a water agency, we're doing that today because it's very important work. Congratulations on the progress. I didn't know that there was already calls out for many water bodies that are close to our regions. And just among the four of us here, I think you named parts of our watershed. So are you able to shed any water or light on those projects? Or are they still embargoed due to the fact that they're under consideration?
So we've done a call, and I should add Lake Winnipeg, I think, has also been part of our recent calls. We've done a call. Right now we're working through the ones that came from particularly the Great Lakes. That's our largest program. And the one with the most significant interest. In fact, the conservation authorities formed a large number of those who made applications for funding. We're certainly going through them now. What I can say is that we received more applications than for which we have budget, which is then showing a sign of significant interest in the work that we have to do. We've got a number of pillars of work that we've asked for proposals, one dealing with the basin in and around Lake Erie to manage nutrient flows going into Lake Erie to reduce phosphate flows into Lake Erie. We have others around the areas of concern and trying to deal with contaminants in and around the Great Lakes and continue to move the areas of concern off of the shared list that we have with the United States. Many of these programs are dealt with through and our priorities through the Canada-U.S. Great Lakes Water Quality Agreement. And similarly, we've have priorities for Lake Winnipeg around nutrient loading, governance, and partnerships. We continue to work with Quebec in identifying the priorities that we need to do around the St. Lawrence Action Plan. And in fact, we've initiated conversations with Quebec around renewing the agreement with Quebec on the St. Lawrence Action Plan, given that agreement will come due in 2026. So early conversations underway. So lots of programmatic work that we're starting to undertake.
That's fantastic. Congrats on all the progress. It's wonderful to see. Mr. Wolfish, in 2023, our budget provided $650 million over 10 years, starting this year to support monitoring, assessment, restoration work in the Great Lakes, all the ones that you mentioned, I believe. It's been a long time, in my view, since any government in Canada has expressed such sincere interest in supporting the Great Lakes and the Great Lakes watershed. It's frankly overdue. This is a huge step forward for our region and in water protections and stewardship. So thank you for undertaking that work. I was hoping to connect it a little bit to some of the Great Lakes Fisheries Commission's work on preventing lamprey infestations. Could you elaborate on any of those potential areas where the Canada Water Agency will be able to support? And I'll stop using water analogies as soon as I'm done, but buoy that work? So
we are navigating those waters. We're in our canoe. We have our paddle. I've had the opportunity to meet several occasions with the Great Lakes Fisheries Commission. There was a Great Lakes Day in Washington that we participated in. There was also a Great Lakes Day here on the Hill. I've met with them individually. I also meet with the International Joint Commission and others who are involved in the Great Lakes work. There was recently an initiative in Montreal where the Great Lakes mayors we're meeting to talk about Great Lakes and development in the Great Lakes and St. Lawrence. We continue to engage with many of those partners to learn about opportunities to collaborate on data, on science, on opportunities for collaborations within the freshwater ecosystem initiatives, and to continue to talk about the policy agenda that we need to develop. One of the key pieces that we're looking at doing is recognizing that we should always have an eye 2, 3, 4 years out into the future. What are kind of issues that we want to be ready for to provide advice on, given the water challenges we have in Canada, to continue to work with them to be able to collect that, their policy work, their data, and to ready ourselves for our ability to be strong advisors to the government on freshwater management.
Thanks. Is it the Great Lakes initiative that you mentioned, is that the Great Lakes Freshwater Ecosystem Initiative?
So we have 8 freshwater ecosystem initiatives across the country.
Okay.
And Great Lakes, Simcoe, Lake of the Woods, St. Lawrence Action Plan, Williston and New Brunswick, Lake Winnipeg, Fraser, and
C'est
Mackenzie.
parfait. Alors, on va s'arrêter là pour prendre le temps de voter.
We'll stop there to take the time to vote. And
Notre devoir est fait et puis on se tourne maintenant.
And now we'll move over to Ms. Puzi. Apologies.
Alors, merci.
Thank you very much. Inaudible for the interpreter.
On en a eu plusieurs.
We've had many meetings and we have met with many witnesses. I believe that everybody brought up the Canada Freshwater Agency or Water Agency, and I think that every witness tried to give it a certain mandate. So the coalition of leaders for the community monitoring of water, Living Lakes, Aqua Action, the Gaspé Beaubien Foundation, the City of Montreal, the Canadian Association for Water Surveillance, Au Secours, and many other organizations who all made recommendations to the agency. But there's one recommendation that came up over and over again. Some said it is essential to get rid of the ministerial silos. We needed there was a requirement for an integrated approach. Make sure that ECCC and ICID work together, improve the collaboration between various federal departments, and adopt an intergovernmental approach to the implementation. I don't know if that's a little much for you, but here is something that we observed. There will be a forum in order to coordinate efficiently the dialogues between various jurisdictions, be they provincial, territorial, or with Indigenous communities. What will be implemented in order to ensure that the exchanges are effective, but also among federal departments? What we've heard is that there are many, that the departments work in silos. Do you see a further collaboration, or do you see just this as an added structure? Thank you for the question. I've met very many stakeholders such as Café Beaubien, Aqua Action, Healthy Water Association. You are right. The government works in silos, and that is why the government decided to create the agency. It is at the core of our mandate to break down those silos. And in order to do that, we have we've created a coordinating body with members that are assistant deputy ministers who take care of freshwater. So, for example, Indigenous services and other bodies. The idea is to coordinate our activities, develop various programs and ideas. And my colleague Laura created a group called, or a policy hub rather, that consists of members from 6 different departments. The goal is to develop policies for their respective departments, so agriculture and so on. So this group will take care of the coordination, and they will have an integrated policy to work for the agency. So this is not some extra red tape, but this is a way for everybody, all the departments, to work together. On the Canada Water Agency website, it says that the action plan on freshwater and updating various policies are part of your purview. You will facilitate access to fresh water for Canadians as well. For Quebecers, our priority is to make sure that there's no interference from other provinces and from the federal government. Will you be overseeing the current resources just to ensure that things move slowly? We will have a protocol agreement with the department that will help us collaborate with, for example, ICED or the meteorological services, or those who will implement the Fisheries Act. There's that structure and a coordinating body, and together we will discuss what issues need addressing, and we will create the possibility to provide recommendations to the department. Many witnesses talked about sharing data. I'm sure that you have that concern as well. What will be implemented more, concretely with regards to sharing data? I'm sorry that your time is up, even though your question is excellent. What about the 2 minutes from previously? I would also like the answer to this question, and sadly my hands are tied. Ms. Collins.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We've heard from a number of witnesses, and first I want to thank all of the witnesses for coming today, sharing your expertise and answering our questions. We have heard from a number of the witnesses who joined us for this study that there is a funding disparity between this kind of central regions of Canada and British Columbia. And the Fraser River is the only watershed in BC that was included on the priority list for the Canada Water Agency. And can you just talk a little bit about how you might address, my home province of British Columbia, our watersheds are under threat of, multi-year droughts, extreme flooding, other climate impacts, but also industry. How are you addressing that concern about the disparity between different regions?
Thank you for that question. It is true that there is a disparity at the moment. The Great Lakes Water Quality, the Great Lakes program has been around for almost 50 years, so it's well developed. We've got targets and results that we can measure, and that's helped build momentum and continued results. Similarly, we've had a good history of almost 30 years now working with Quebec for the St. Lawrence Action Plan. We're getting there on Lake Winnipeg. We've had some really good progress. We've got an MOU with Manitoba. We're starting to develop some very good targets and approaches. And again, so that's gathering momentum. We're at that stage where we need to do that now in a few other places. The Fraser, the Mackenzie, the Wallastock being key pieces where we need to start to move forward. Our goal is to continue to work with people in the Fraser, with the government of British Columbia at identifying what's the kind of science that we need to do. Using that science, how can we start to develop the appropriate types of targets? What are the gaps in information that we have? And from there, then we can start working on an action plan. I think that those will take some time for us to do, but the goal then would be through that collaboration to go from early conversations to one where we can actually make a solid case for investment.
One of the other issues that was raised, a threat to BC waters, are the invasive zebra mussels. And, it's a big concern. What are we doing to kind of prevent the spread of zebra mussels and to be proactive about this threat? That's
a great question. So zebra mussels and invasive aquatic species tend to be the responsibility of the Department of Fisheries and Oceans. Our goal would be to continue to work with the Department of Fisheries and Oceans and look for opportunities with them. And we would do this across any of our freshwater ecosystems, whether it's zebra mussels or sea lamprey or Asian carp. Look to see what are the tools available in place given their mandates or what our partners are doing, and seeing what actions we can put on the ground as part of our freshwater ecosystem initiatives to prevent spread of invasive species.
Do you have a sense of whether that's a reactive approach or a proactive approach? What we've heard from witnesses is that once the zebra mussels are there, kind of feels like it's almost a lost cause, and so
So I would need to defer to Fisheries and Oceans on whether they're, how they've designed their approach and whether it's proactive or reactive. But our goal would be to continue to work with our stakeholders and with the Fisheries and Oceans to survey what actions in addition can we take through the Canada Water Agency to help support.
One of the concerns I have is around kind of the siloing of this kind of work. It seems important that the Canada Water Agency would be working really closely with fisheries. Is there any way you could follow up with some information about how you work with the Department of Fisheries on this issue?
Absolutely, sure.
Thanks. Another question is just around the nation-to-nation relationship that's so central to the work that you're embarking on. How are you working in collaboration with Indigenous nations and engaging with the diversity of nations, in addition to the national Indigenous organizations, but also individual nations?
Thank you. I'll answer that question in two ways. So I'll start with our programmatic work on the ground. So in each of our freshwater ecosystem initiatives, we have sought out partnerships with First Nations and Métis. Largely, we have not had the same outreach yet with Inuit in large part because we don't have freshwater ecosystem initiatives where Inuit communities. And in many cases, so for example, in Ontario, we've got a relationship with Chiefs of Ontario, with the Métis Nation of Ontario. We're looking at a funding arrangement. We're co-developing that funding arrangement with them to help identify the priorities that they would like to pursue in those ecosystems and then implement them. We take a different approach in each ecosystem depending upon the relationship with the province, priorities of the province, but we're taking a similar approach in the Lake Winnipeg Basin. In Quebec, we're working closely with Quebec at identifying ways to work with First Nations, and that will be part of our ongoing conversations as we renew our Canada-Quebec agreement for the St. Lawrence Action Plan. So it's on the programmatic level. At the national level, we have started to engage with First Nations, Métis, and Inuit at the provincial level and at the federal level and through a variety of other mechanisms to talk about how we want to work with them on the modernization of the Canada Water Act. The goal here is to develop with them the mechanisms and the ways to interact so that we're being respectful of traditional ways of information sharing, respectful of the information that they may hold, and we want to make sure that we're bringing into the conversation the water carriers. We're planning to have a bit of a grassroots assembly of First Peoples, Inuit, Métis, and First Nations to have a conversation around water and share perspectives. And we're looking to do so in a way that is sensitive to the needs and the approaches and perspectives that First Nation, Métis, and Inuit have on water.
Merci. On est arrivé à bout des 6.
Thank you. We have come to the end of the 6 minutes. Now on to Mr. Detel to start the second round of questions. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Hello to all my colleagues and welcome to all the witnesses to your Canadian Parliament. Of course, we are here to talk about the Canada Water Agency. Of course, we're all very passionate about water. Of course, Mr. Van Koeverden earlier today talked about recreational activities in water. And of course, when you've won 4 Olympic medals, then we're talking about a lot more than just recreational activities, and congratulations on the 20-year anniversary of that win. Mr. Wolfish, thank you for being here, and thank you for expressing yourself in French and for your bilingualism. My colleague from Terrebonne, am I correct? Mr. Deltel, I am from Repentigny. I'm so sorry. Terrebonne is the neighbor. Correct. I actually know that because I charge my electric car in that riding. Earlier you were talking about respecting jurisdictions. When we talk about water, this is really a federal, provincial, and municipal issue. In Canada, we span more than 5,000 kilometers, 3 territories, 10 provinces, more than 4,000 municipalities. How do you manage the jurisdictions of each and every one of these areas when there is a serious, dangerous issue? Thank you for your question. It really depends on the situation and on the specific challenge. With regards to anything that is regulatory, that might be a question of applying the law in place and or identifying who is in charge of implementing a regulatory program. Federally, there are some laws that should be implemented. The Canada Water Agency's goal is to coordinate the political programs to protect fresh water by taking into consideration the responsibilities of each and every jurisdiction across the country. We will not have a regulatory role as an agency. It's very clear that every province has its own regulatory bodies and programs to manage water. Our goal is to respect that approach and rather to coordinate our efforts in order to implement programs that would protect fresh water or restore ecosystems. I have a delicate question about the relationship with Indigenous. And I say that because sometimes between various Indigenous communities, and it's totally normal that this happens, but it might be a bit more challenging. I have the honor and privilege of representing the Wendake Nation for the last 16 years. They have ancestral territories in the Laurentians Park north of Quebec. It touches on the Saint-Jean, of the Lac Saint-Jean and the Saguenay. But that, of course, there's another Indigenous community that claims the same territory, and therefore it is legitimate that this would happen, and it is absolutely normal, but sometimes there can be some overlapping, and what would you do in that case? First, we would have to look at which jurisdiction needs to intervene. We want to respect Quebec's jurisdiction recently I was lucky enough to meet the Wabanaki Nation in Quebec, and we have a partnership with them to implement some programs within the St. Lawrence Action Plan. Our goal is to coordinate our activities with according to the priorities of Quebec and its stakeholders. We, of course, want to respect the agreement between Quebec and Canada for the St. Laurent Action Plan activities.
Are you connected now? Or you were connected with the audio, but now we can see you. So you have 5 minutes for your questions.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the witnesses for being here today. My question, first question to Chair, are we in a first hour or are we in the second?
We're in the second panel, the second and the first hour, but the second round of questions. I'm sorry. Yeah, first hour. Yeah, sorry. Okay, well.
So we're okay. So
we're with the Canada Water Agency. Yeah.
My first question is about Canada Water Agency's relationship with the provinces. At our meeting on June 4th, we heard from provincial government witnesses about their concern that provincial jurisdiction be respected. They did not want that agency to be regulator or duplicator of services that the provinces are already doing. They wanted the agency to be sport-focused with the ability to collaborate on major water projects, cost-sharing opportunities, building infrastructure, and information and knowledge sharing. So, A, how would you respond to those concerns? B, how will the Canada Water Agency ensure that it does not infringe on provincial jurisdiction? C, will the Canada Water Agency expand federal responsibility for freshwater? If so, in what ways?
Thank you for those questions. So when we did our consultations with provinces and territories over the period of 2020 to 2023, we heard similar comments. And if you look at the act that is currently before the Senate now for the creation of the Canada Water Agency, you'll note that the agency does not have a regulatory mandate. And that's important because we recognize the regulatory role that are played by the provinces and territories, or that already exist and are performed well by other federal departments. So we have no intention at this time of moving into a regulatory role. The provinces have noted that they do want to have opportunities for identifying projects and priorities and to have joint funding programs. And that's indeed what our freshwater ecosystem initiatives are about. If you look at some of our partners in Ontario, the conservation authorities are in fact creatures of the province. We do, through the St. Lawrence Action Plan, provide support to Quebec. With Lake Winnipeg, we have partners that we joint fund. In many cases, our funding have matches from provinces and other sources. And so we have an opportunity to be able to work together on joint funding for projects. Through the MOU with Manitoba, the Canada-Ontario agreement, and through our agreement with Quebec, we're able to identify joint priorities and allow for those priorities to pattern our work. The Canada Water Agency does not have an intention at this time to expand federal areas of work, but rather to break the silos, to coordinate. Frankly, that's enough work on our plate just doing that, bringing together a coordinated function, bringing expertise together. An example of what we've recently done in this area is we joined as a junior partner with ISC to help support them in the co-development with the AFN of the Bill C-61, which is currently at second reading, and that's the Commons. That was a very early accomplishment that I feel the agency was able to undertake, that shows exactly how we can bring expertise together to break down silos, but not get in the way of what the role of provinces and territories.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Canada is continuing to see the impacts of climate change. But this year's wildfire season starting very early on this season. What role do you expect that Canada Water Agency play in adapting to impact of climate change in the context of our water resources?
Thank you. I'll start with that answer, and then if my colleague from the MSC wants to chime in, we'll certainly provide that opportunity. We recognize that it's not just wildfires, but the drought, floods, variability. We want to work very closely with Environment and Climate Change Canada on the adaptation strategy, continue our work on policy research, coordinate across the federal government on these issues with our federal partners, continue to gather information, intelligence, and analysis from our academic partners, First Nation, Métis, and Inuit, provinces and territories, so we can continue to develop avenues of dialogue and conversation, and then, where necessary, be able to support federal departments or provinces in the actions that they will take. This is a long-term project for us, recognizing that climate change impacts are part of the ongoing work that we need to do.
Merci. Malheureusement, on est rendu au...
Unfortunately, we've run out of time. Ms. Posé, it is now your turn. Earlier, you answered questions about sharing data. That is a question on everyone's lips. Now you're saying that you will continue to collect data. But I don't think that they cared about or not that they didn't care, but it's not. The question was not about collecting the data, but rather sharing it. Indeed, there are many mechanisms to share data. First of all, we are organizing a workshop in Burlington in September in order to create a framework that would allow us to collect and share data. There are currently issues with regards to collecting, rather sharing and access the data. Secondly, my colleague can speak to you about more about ISED's approach, but we do have a strategy in place to work with various partners in order to implement a strategy for science and technology nationally. Indeed, all of the departments and groups that appeared as witnesses told us that there is just so much information out there. And what we heard is that they don't have access to all of the data. Of course, that's a very important element. And I would like to talk about climate change now. We're talking about droughts, flooding, and there's a water shortage in some places in the country. Do you have a particular role to play with regards to the climate change? And to remedy these problems with federal regulation, do you have any recommendations to make? Part of our role is to contribute to the conversation on the impact of climate change. We would take into consideration that the ECCC does already have a department that does research to coordinate various activities on climate change. Thank you. Your time is up. On to Ms. Collins.
Yeah, maybe starting with, I met with members of the Mikisew Cree First Nation a couple weeks ago, and they are deeply concerned about the quality of water in their communities and the effects of the tailing pond runoff. They've requested for almost 2 decades now a health study. They have abnormal rates of bile cancer, rare forms of cancer that shouldn't be occurring in these numbers. And I'm curious about how your department is working to ensure that First Nations, other Indigenous communities have access to clean drinking water, and how we are, whether there's an update on the funding for the health study that they've been asking for.
Thanks for that. So I don't have an update on the funding for their health study, in part because that's not an area where the Canada Water Agency would take leadership. What I can say is that we are working very closely with Indigenous Services Canada on the bill that's currently before Parliament for safe drinking water for First Nations, clean water for First Nations, sorry. We were a junior partner with them in the co-development of that act, working with the AFN. We support them in the dialogues that they have with Treaty 6, 7, and 8 in Alberta, where I believe the Mikisew Cree First Nation participates in those processes. So we support Minister Haidu in the work that she's doing, recognizing the important leadership that she plays. We continue to have a relationship and work with Health Canada and the work that they do on water quality and health.
Thanks. What steps is your department taking to address the concerns that we've heard at this committee around PFAS, and especially in our drinking water, but contamination in lakes and rivers across Canada?
Caroline, do you want to take that one?
Thank you for the question. So Environment Canada has various tools to control the pollution, including regulatory controls. But right now we are continue to work with Health Canada to assess the chemicals. And so what I can say today is that there should be additional reports that should be released in the coming months.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Cram.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you to all the witnesses for joining us today. Last week, the committee heard from witnesses from the Saskatchewan Water Security Agency, and they talked in considerable detail about a major irrigation project in Saskatchewan with water coming from Lake Diefenbaker. Mr. Wolfish, you've talked in this meeting about funding initiatives from the Canada Water Agency and joint funding for projects with the provinces, and you've said that a call for proposals went out for projects from the Great Lakes, the Lake of the Woods, Lake Simcoe, and Lake Winnipeg. Is the Lake Diefenbaker project also one of the projects that you're looking at?
So Lake Diefenbaker is not part of the particular freshwater ecosystem initiatives, although we are concerned about the basin for Lake Winnipeg. We recently had conversations with our Saskatchewan colleagues. They've raised some of these issues. I'm aware that they're also interested in investments in water management infrastructure for farmers and other agricultural needs. Some of these questions actually are important for us to coordinate and learn more about, and then for us to be able to work with them in connecting up with Housing Infrastructure Canada, Communities Canada, on the roles that they could be played in supporting some of these initiatives, if possible.
So what are the criteria for some of these joint funding for projects? Because the Lake Diefenbaker project was very clearly the number one ask from the government of Saskatchewan. How can we work that ask into the criteria for these joint fundings?
So I'm happy to share the criteria with this committee. We can come back and show you the criteria that we've used in the various, or that we are using in the various ecosystem initiatives.
Okay. Can you share it with us now, or do you have to?
Two pieces. Some of them are technical in nature, around eligibility. We have criteria that around the priorities that we set for each of the freshwater ecosystems from the Lake Winnipeg area. One of the concerns are often around nutrient loading, Indigenous partnerships, value for money, and these sorts of pieces. So those types of criteria are used to evaluate project proposals that come in from our partners, and then those that meet those criteria may get funding.
Okay, and the call for proposals that have already gone out, have there been any calls to the government of Saskatchewan or any other stakeholders in Saskatchewan?
They tend to go out to our partners. We work in collaboration with the provinces, and so in the Lake Winnipeg area, largely with Manitoba. And then our calls will go out with an information to the provinces, and then we fund the partners directly, not the province.
Okay, and so when you say our partners, who are you referring to?
They could be a variety of different organizations. They could be not-for-profit organizations working the landscape. They could be an organization like Alice that does work with farmers. They could be First Nation or Métis community. It could be a municipality. It could be a conservation authority. So a variety of partners that may be working in the work in those freshwater ecosystems.
And if somebody wanted to apply for one of these projects tomorrow, is there an application form on the website, or how does one go about going through the application process?
So it depends on when we've launched the call and when the closing dates are. But we have information that goes on the website. We send our information to our network of partners through the FEIs. They often call with information, with questions. We work through those questions with them, and then proposals have a date that ends. We then go through a period of eligibility review, technical review, challenge function, and then we make our recommendations.
And if I understood correctly, the potential applicants have to wait for the Canada Water Agency to contact them, or?
They are welcome to contact us with more information. Happy to give people information on the opportunities that are available.
Okay. Another concern that the witnesses expressed was duplication of services that the provinces are already doing. How will the Canada Water Agency be conscientious of not overlapping or duplicating work that provinces are already doing?
So I guess it depends on the issue and the province. Our goal is to work with the provinces in identifying the priorities that we should be having to work on. So if it's a policy area or a coordination effort, there may be a variation across the country. We'll want to hear from the provinces around their issues and their priorities. We've had a number of bilateral conversations across the country to date. We'll continue to do so. We also leverage multilateral forum to exchange information. In the programming work that we do, we use mechanisms under the Canada Water Act, such as the MOU with Manitoba, the agreement with Quebec, the Canada-Ontario agreement, to identify shared priorities and then divide up the work.
Thank you. Ms. Taylor-Roy.
And as this is our last meeting of this important study, I'd like to make a comment and then ask a broader question about the Canada Water Agency. First, I'd like to thank you for the call for proposals, in particular on this, the freshwater ecosystems, and as I represent Aurora Oak Ridges Richmond Hill, in particular for Lake Simcoe. It's very important, but many of my constituents are concerned about not only Lake Simcoe, but freshwater across Canada and the challenges we're facing. And you know, in fact, in the public engagement process, as reported in the What We Heard report, almost all of the people who participated in that process supported the government's initiative to establish the Canada Water Agency. I think it spans 75 days of engagement, over 2,700 Canadians, 900 national forums, 6 regional forums, tens of thousands of website visits, emails, and much, much more. And it ensured regional engagement from coast to coast to coast. So, and then in this committee, we've heard from many, many witnesses over the course of this study, most of whom support and find need for a Canada Water Agency. But there are some who question the need for it, including a member of our committee who questioned it earlier in the meeting. And so because of that, I wanted you to comment broadly on the need for the Canada Water Agency. Because even though we've had, you know, provincial, territorial watershed authorities and many departments and agencies in the government addressing the serious issues facing us with fresh water, we still see that the challenges have been increasing over the past few decades. And as someone who is concerned about the future of our country and the future for the next 7 generations, as Indigenous people would often say, I feel like if we don't have this coordinated, concerted effort made by the government to establish the Canada Water Agency, that we're not going to be able to address a lot of these challenges. And I'm talking about things from, obviously, droughts, the tailings ponds, the management of water, so much, water quality, PFAS, all sorts of things we've been talking about. So if you could talk a little bit about how CWA is going to address those concerns more broadly, and how you think, or why you think this is necessary, and what might happen if we didn't put this in place at this stage in terms of the progress of these challenges and the destruction of our fresh water.
So I'd start off by saying that protecting your fresh water in Canada is a major effort, and it requires lots of different tools: regulatory, financial, information, science, modeling. It's a big effort. Right now, we're all operating in our silos. There is not much of a mechanism to share that information across those silos, to develop coordinated advice to support ministers or cabinet, to engage with provinces and territories in a coherent, integrated fashion, to provide a opportunity to hear and listen to Métis, First Nation, and Inuit perspectives, to do so in a way that's respectful of Indigenous traditions, the need for removing colonial approaches to the way we engage with them, to do a distinctions-based approach. So what we're doing in the Canada Water Agency is creating that focus, that place to be able to do that. And to be able to do that, that provides a voice directly to the minister that's not mitigated by others who have to manage or mitigate that through other avenues or vehicles. We provide an opportunity, a single window for the provinces or territories to engage with us on questions that we can then navigate the federal system with them. We won't have all the tools all the time. We won't have all the solutions, but our job is to help figure that out. For Canadians, creating a portal site, what we would call a one window on water. Wow. To help Canadians navigate the system, to get information, to connect with where the appropriate information or responsibilities lie. Water is going to be the issue of the 21st century. Water will have pressures from industrial growth, agricultural development, changes in climate change, and so having a place that can be a focal point to bring the dialogue together, provide that advice, and connect with provinces, connect with First Nations, with Métis, and with Inuit, that is something that is is, from my perspective, a value added that we can bring to the team.
And thank you very much. That really wrapped up nicely, and I appreciate your comments on this. It's, as we heard from Indigenous witnesses, water is life, and it's not just a resource to be managed. It's something we need to respect, and we really need to think about in the way that you've described. So thank you for your work, and to all the witnesses, thank you.
Thank you. That brings our first panel to a close. I just want to also thank you, Mr. Wolfish, for the great work that you and others at this table are doing to advance Canada's water security at a time of water stress and climate stress. So thank you very much. It's been wonderful having you before the committee at different times for this study. And I hope you'll find our report, which should come out in the fall, I guess, interesting and useful for the work that you do. So colleagues, we'll just break for a minute, and we'll start up with our second panel very shortly. Thank you.
All right, we are ready to start the second panel. All of the participants have we are ready for the second panel. All of the participants are online, and we've completed the sound tests. Everything is in order. Here with us today, we have 4 witnesses from 3 different groups. We have from the Government of Alberta, Kate Rich, Assistant Deputy Minister, Policy, Environment and Protected Areas. From the Government of the Northwest Territories, Julian Canagan, Assistant Deputy Minister, Environmental Management, Monitoring and Climate Change, Environment and Climate Change. And from the Government of Yukon, we have online Heather Jerusek, Director, Water Resources, Department of Environment, and Brendan Mulligan, Senior Scientist, Groundwater, Water Resources, Department of Environment. We will begin with Ms. Rich. You have 5 minutes for your opening remarks.
Thank you very much for this opportunity to appear before the committee. I'm joining you from Edmonton, Alberta, on the traditional territory of the signatories to Treaty 6, and I also acknowledge the Métis people of Alberta who have a deep connection to this land. Water management is a priority of the Government of Alberta, and I really appreciate the opportunity to briefly share some key elements to ensure the protection, conservation, and fair allocation of water for Albertans now as well as years to come. Alberta's Water for Life strategy outlines our commitments to managing and safeguarding water. The strategy was established in 2003 and has undergone review to ensure actions continue to achieve the strategy's 3 goals: safe, secure drinking water supplies, healthy aquatic ecosystems, and reliable quality water supplies for a sustainable economy. The strategy also includes 3 strategic directions to achieve those goals: knowledge and research, water conservation, and partnerships. Water partners are empowered to support watershed stewardship across our province. At the provincial level, the Alberta Water Council provides policy advice to the government. Its 23 members are from governments, industry, and non-governmental organizations. Alberta also has 11 watershed planning and advisory councils. These multi-sector organizations lead planning, report on the state of the watershed, and advance water literacy at the watershed scale. At the local level, we have over 100 recognized watershed stewardship groups leading on-the-ground action and projects. Alberta has 2 primary acts to protect our water and guide water use. The Water Act guides the allocation and withdrawal of freshwater resources and the protection of rivers, streams, lakes, wetlands, and groundwater. The Environmental Protection Enhancement Act supports protection of the environment, including measures regarding water quality and pollution prevention. There are other acts that help manage water, like the Alberta Land Stewardship Act, under which we've established water quality management frameworks, and the Fisheries Act, which supports the control of aquatic invasive species. Our legislation includes provisions for establishing water management plans. These are statutory plans and are developed for water basins to guide regulatory decisions and approvals, establish minimum in-stream flow needs, outline conditions for diversion, and set strategies to protect the aquatic environment. To further manage land use activities and the cumulative impacts, Alberta also establishes environmental management frameworks for water. These are part of our land use planning approach. Underpinning our water management